Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly Magnuson, and we are here for Ask the Security Guy. I'm going to turn it over to Shawn, who is going to start by talking some about all the stuff we've seen in the news about the Sony hack and the fallout from that. So, Shawn, share with us.
Good morning. So the Sony hack, there's been a lot in the news about it, and we were wondering, how did it happen? How did Sony get hacked once again? What all did they steal? Why did they steal it? And the ever-present question, who done it? So right now we have news outlets and our own government saying that it's North Korea because it looks like it's sourced out of that country's internet gateways, coming from their IP addresses, etc. If you read some of the geeky stuff that I read on a regular basis, the level of sophistication that these attackers use to get into Sony for this one is pretty high, which comes back to two things. One, if it looks like it's obvious that they came from North Korea, that's probably not where they came from, because they know enough to not come from where they appear to come from. So I don't put a whole lot of faith in the idea that it was actually North Korea behind this, but opinions vary. The second piece is the idea that any company can secure themselves completely. So Sony's taken a lot of flack for bad security over the years, and a lot of it earned. They have had very lax security practices. They've had major breaches before. And their responses to their breaches has been lackluster at best. In this case, though, very sophisticated tools were used to get in and do the work that was done, which really kind of brings to mind a thought that when we talk about securing an organization, and it's the same principle as securing yourself at your house, you don't necessarily want to invest a tremendous amount of time and money in buying all the highest end security gadgets you can find. Really what you want is to invest yourself in good security practices, good tools, not the best necessarily, but good solid tools, and shoot for good enough. There's a common saying that perfection is the enemy of good enough, which, if you're shooting for perfection, you never get there. With good enough, you do, because at some point along the line, you say, okay, it's enough. What hackers count on is people being lazy and careless. So if you're aware of what's going on in the security world, you're aware of good practices, keeping your computers current with their patches through either Mac software update or through Windows update, keeping your antivirus current and your subscription to your antivirus current, making sure that you're not using hacked versions of software at home, which is surprisingly easy to find. And if any of you have children, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, because they can find it for you. Music sharing, file sharing services like BitTorrent or uTorrent, whatever's current these days, all are gateways for this kind of malware to come in. And if you're using good practices and avoiding those kinds of things, if when you log into a website, you're looking for the HTTPS instead of the HTTP, chances are you're already in a group of people who are that your common attacker just isn't interested in, because you're not low-hanging fruit at that point. So the idea that we take with security here at APU is we're not shooting for impossible. My goal with APU security is not to make us impossible to breach, because that in and of itself is impossible to achieve. Technology is imperfect. There are errors. There are millions and millions and millions of lines of code that make up all of the different systems that we use on a daily basis. So to think about it realistically, the idea that any one of these software systems is utterly and completely secure is impossible. But what we do is we layer security here. So we've got layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of different security controls, most of which our users never see. And if I'm doing my job right, we'll never see, because it should be transparent and it should work with you. There are some things that we can't obviously get around, like username and password. There are some controls that we just have to have that are intrusive. They require you to do something, to interact. But we try to keep those to a minimum so that it's user-friendly and it doesn't impede your ability to do your job. The same is true at home. When you set up your username and password for your Gmail account or your Yahoo or your MSN or your Hotmail, Netflix or whatever you use, whatever services you use, those are security controls designed to help keep you safe. And then the companies behind them also have layers upon layers upon layers of security. So to put it the way I describe it sometimes here is, my goal isn't to be impossible to your average hacker. My goal is to be annoying enough that he will go somewhere else. And that's really the bottom line, because they're searching for the easy targets. In Sony's case, this time around, Sony was not an easy target per se. Someone was absolutely determined to get in. And what that shows is any organization, if there is a determined attacker out there, they can find a way if they've got the skills. And Sony is once again living proof of that.
So yeah, the whole idea of the layers of security, I know we can't really share a lot about what that looks like, but for us as customers, us as the general users, what are some of the things that we need to think about and get in the habit of practicing to add our own layers of security?
So it was like I was saying, when you set up a username and password for your email account and your Facebook and your Twitter and whatever other social media accounts you have, use different passwords for every account. Use good, strong passwords that are either based on past phrases, so a nice long string, compromising, that makes up a phrase. Also, I recommend that you use a password manager, so you don't have to try to remember all of these things. Because for those of us who are connected more than others, that turns into a lot of usernames and passwords really fast. And it's almost impossible to remember all of them. So a password manager makes it much simpler, where we can go and we can remember the password to the password manager, the password to our computer, and we're pretty much done. And let the password manager deal with remembering everything else. Another security control at home is good antivirus. Make sure you're using good antivirus. A practice, most of these infections will come in through some kind of link, either in email or on a website, on an ad. Be very thoughtful about what you click on. Is this from someone you know? Is it a website that you trust? Ask the questions. Be suspicious.
Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking about even here on campus is making sure that when you are at your computer and you're getting up and walking away, don't forget to lock your computer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Windows machine, it's as simple as holding down the Windows key and typing an L.
Yep.
And that locks down your computers. Now Macs, you got to work a little harder, but you can protect those as well.
Exactly. And, unfortunately, I see that quite a bit here at APU, where I walk around. So many of our areas are open to the public, or, where anybody can walk in to a number of our buildings and not really be challenged as to why they're there. And if your computer's unlocked, there's no telling what might be up on your screen at any given time, or what could be printed off quickly if you've gone to the restroom, you've gone to get a cup of coffee, or whatever. All it takes is a couple minutes. Which actually, speaking of walking away from our computers, we've seen in the past few months, we've seen a number of thefts of equipment here at APU. And they have ranged from being stolen out of people's vehicles to being stolen out of people's homes. And some of those are preventable, some are not. We had an instance recently where a gentleman was at one of our sites in an APU building, walked away briefly from the laptop. When he came back, someone had come in from the outside, walked into that area, stolen it, and walked back out. And nobody was the wiser. So a question was raised to me. They said, well, how do we know when we're vulnerable? How do we know when our equipment is vulnerable to theft? And to be a little draconian about it, the simple answer is easy. If you can't see it, and if you aren't physically in control of it, it's not in your control, and it is vulnerable to theft. I did some traveling over the holiday, and I was just amazed at what I saw in the airports and on planes, rental car agencies. People would leave their laptops, their iPads, their luggage, their computer bags, just laying around and go walk off and do something and then come back. And I'm sitting there looking at this stuff going, okay, I could fund Christmas with what I could pick up here. But it was so trusting of, the folks were so trusting and so believing that nothing bad would happen, that they felt no problem whatsoever getting up and walking off and leaving their stuff there. When I was on the plane, people would leave their iPads sitting on their seat and go to the restroom. Now, granted, on an airplane, it's a pretty short list of possibilities.
Yeah.
But if that happens closer to landing, when you're going to strap in, who's to know? It's not like you can get up at that point and look around. And once everybody's getting off the plane, that's madness in and of itself.
And you get distracted, and you're thinking you put it back in your bag, and you don't even realize it's gone until a couple hours later when you get to the hotel or wherever your final destination is and realize it's gone.
Yep. And how many of us have personal information on those devices? And we talk about in our security awareness the importance of having at least some kind of PIN code or a lock on your mobile devices, your phone or your tablet or whatever. 90% of what I saw while I was traveling did not. And it was, all it was casual observation. I wasn't actually paying that close attention. It's what I noticed. But it was really surprising, and it was not a pleasant surprise for me. I was really disheartened to see how people just didn't seem to realize what the risk was.
And I've seen that here on campus, when I'll be in Sakioka, the training room, somebody will have left their books, their purse, their laptop, and go to the restroom or go take a phone call outside. It's kind of, again, very trusting that nothing's going to happen.
Yep. And so for instance, let's talk about physical security with mobile devices for a minute. Holly, do you think if you have, like my car does, where the rear windows of my car are blacked out, do you think it would be okay for me to leave my backpack with my laptop in the back seat?
At the end of the day, no. Okay. Because I don't know. I'm getting more and more in the habit, because I don't have blacked out windows, of just going ahead and putting it my backpack with my laptop in it in the trunk.
Right, exactly. So I've actually encountered a number of people who think that the blacked out windows, the window tinting on the back windows, is actually enough to prevent a problem because people can't see in. What they don't seem to get is that with a $5 LED flashlight that you can pick up at the counter at Home Depot, it will shine right through that and give you full visibility of what's in the back seat.
Yeah, I've got a couple of videos that I've found showing people break into laptop or to cars to get laptops, and it's very interesting how subtle they are, and it takes them no time.
Yeah, no, and people are brazen about it. I mean, they'll just walk right up, and it's so easy. You just walk right up and pop that window, and next thing you know, you're in, out, and done, and walking down the street.
Yeah,
Uh,
one of the videos, it looks like he's kind of walking back and forth, and he throws something at the car to see if there's a car alarm, and
uh-huh.
there's no alarm. So then pretty soon he throws a bigger rock through the window. And he keeps watching and seeing if anybody's going to say anything to him or do anything, because it's on a busy street. And
Right.
then the next thing you know, you watch him, grabbing the laptop out of the car, and he starts walking down the street, and he tucks it in his jacket, and he's gone.
Yep. And it's just that simple.
Yeah, and it was less than a 3-minute video.
Yep. Yep. It happens quick. So when I talk to people who, especially people who have laptops and are taking them home or taking them with them on business frequently, if you have to leave it in your car, lock it in your trunk. Out of sight, out of mind. The trunk is an extra layer of security by itself because it usually requires a different locking mechanism to be engaged. I mean, that's not to say they can't pop a window and use the trunk release button on the dash, but there's more involved. And if it isn't visible in the first place, there's no way for a thief to know that it's even there. So that's an extra layer of security right there. Out of sight, out of mind. You could almost think about that as using another term we use called security through obscurity. Mm-hmm. It's secure because they don't know it's there. Not always the case, but generally speaking, if a thief is looking at your car and the laptop's locked in the trunk versus in the back seat, chances are better with the trunk.
Yep.
Now we've had cases where equipment was stolen from people's homes. There's not a lot you can do there. I mean, if a thief has already broken into your house, he's gone through all of your layers of security in the first place. I mean, and that's just unavoidable and very unfortunate because there's a lot of damage both from a physical standpoint and a psychological standpoint that goes along with a home break-in. And they're very, very troubling. So those kinds of theft, but we also see cases where I hear this is I just set it down for a minute and turn my back. Again, if you can't see it, if it isn't within line of sight constantly or in your hand, it's vulnerable. Because all it takes is less than 30 seconds. In a lot of cases, it takes less than 5.
Yep. Oh, I've been in restaurants and see people, leaving their stuff, and all you'd have to do is just walk by, pick it up, and just keep walking right out the door.
Exactly.
And you act like you, as I say, you act like you know what you're doing, and it's yours. It's not a big deal.
Yep. It's all about, and that's the point we hit on in our security awareness training class as well. That's social engineering. You act like you belong. You have an air of presence. The presence that you're putting out there is, I belong here, and this equipment belongs to me. You're not acting like some punk and saying, I'm stealing this. You're saying, I picked this up. It's mine. I'm walking out the door slowly, and nonchalantly.
Yep. And one of the videos I found, the girl was basically robbed with her car. Her car doors were unlocked. Mm-hmm. And some people were coming to look at a TV that she had for sale, and she wasn't around, and they just were looking at the car and opened it up, and the girl grabs the backpack and gets in the passenger seat, and pretty soon the guy hops in the driver's seat, and they just drive away.
Yep. It's just that simple. So those are the topics I really wanted to cover today. I'm wondering, do we have any questions at this point?
None that I see. Because at this point we have no viewers. But
it's early in the season yet.
Yes.
So, alrighty then. Well,
we'll call this one a wrap. And for those of you who are watching this after the production, we will be back next month, first Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. You can please visit security.apu.edu if you've got questions or interested in learning more about what we're talking about here today. And until then, we will see you later.
Bye.